The entire mansion fell into a stunned hush when the young woman walked to the head of the table, pulled out the chair, and sat down in the seat that everyone knew belonged to the wife. She wore a calm smile as though she had every right to be there, while the real wife stood just a few feet away, clutching a folded napkin with trembling hands. Her husband said nothing. His mother quickly looked elsewhere. But then an elderly woman at the far end of the table slowly pushed herself upright, and what she shouted next made every single person in that vast room freeze in place. Before we go any further, if you believe that kindness, loyalty, and the power of second chances can truly change a life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more heartfelt stories like this one to you. For 6 long years, Elena had truly believed that marriage meant standing firmly beside someone through every storm that came their way. She had married Daniel back when neither of them had very much at all. They rented a tiny apartment, shared one old car between them, and celebrated their first anniversary with a simple homemade dinner because they simply could not afford to go to a restaurant. Elena never once complained about any of it. When Daniel started his own company, she worked late into the night at home, helping him organize piles of invoices, answering countless emails, and encouraging him whenever investors turned down his ideas. Slowly but surely, everything began to change. His company became highly successful, their apartment grew into a grand mansion, and the humble man Elena had married turned into a wealthy businessman whose name started appearing in newspapers. But while Daniel's bank account expanded rapidly, the distance between him and Elena grew even faster. At first, Elena blamed the immense pressure of his work. Then came the late nights that stretched into early mornings, the unexplained meetings, and the constant stream of excuses. Daniel stopped asking about her day. He stopped noticing when she was tired or upset. Eventually, Elena uncovered the painful truth. There was another woman named Vanessa, someone younger, confident, and who had become a regular fixture at Daniel's business events. Elena found photographs of them together and messages that left absolutely no room for denial. Her heart shattered into pieces, but she did not create a dramatic scene. She simply asked Daniel one straightforward question. Did their marriage still mean anything to him at all? Daniel could not bring himself to answer. That heavy silence turned out to be more agonizing than any confession he could have made. Elena remained in the mansion for one single reason, and that reason was Daniel's grandmother, Margaret. The elderly woman had always treated Elena like a beloved granddaughter rather than just an in-law. When everyone else praised Daniel's success, Margaret was the only one who remembered who had stood by him when he had absolutely nothing. She noticed Elena's sadness long before anyone else ever did. But Margaret had recently been recovering from a serious illness, and Elena refused to abandon her during that difficult time. Every single morning, Elena brought her breakfast, helped organize her medications, and sat beside her whenever she felt lonely or frightened. Then came the family dinner that would change everything forever. Daniel had invited numerous relatives and several important business associates to the mansion for the evening. Elena spent the entire afternoon helping the staff prepare the dining room. She arranged fresh flowers, double-checked the table settings, and made sure that Margaret's favorite dishes were ready and waiting. She still quietly hoped that perhaps Daniel would finally speak to her honestly about everything. Instead, when the guests began to arrive, Vanessa walked right through the front doors wearing an elegant dress and carrying herself as though she already belonged to this family. Elena's stomach tightened into a knot. Daniel greeted Vanessa without any hint of embarrassment whatsoever. He introduced her to several guests as someone who had been helping with the company. Nobody truly believed that excuse, but nobody challenged him openly either. Elena quietly stepped aside, because she had learned long ago that humiliation only becomes worse when you fight against it in front of strangers. When dinner was finally announced, everyone began making their way to their seats. Elena approached the chair beside Daniel, the place she had occupied faithfully for 6 years. But before she could sit down, Vanessa walked over, pulled the chair out, and sat in it herself. The room became painfully, agonizingly quiet. Vanessa looked directly at Elena and offered a small, smug smile. Then she casually reached for her glass of water as though absolutely nothing unusual had happened. Daniel glanced toward Elena, but he said not one single word. His silence told her everything she needed to know. For a moment, Elena felt as though the entire mansion had vanished from beneath her feet. She looked at that chair and remembered celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, and Daniel's greatest victories while sitting there. She remembered when they had received their very first major business contract. She remembered Daniel holding her hand beneath the table because he was so nervous. She remembered all those nights when she had believed with all her heart that they were building a future together. Now another woman was sitting in her place. Elena lowered her eyes and turned to walk away. That was when Margaret's chair scraped loudly against the polished floor. The elderly woman stood up with surprising strength. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp and blazing with fury. Everyone in the room turned toward her. Margaret looked directly at Vanessa and pointed a shaking finger toward the chair. "Get up." Vanessa's smug smile vanished instantly. Margaret's voice shook the entire dining room. She reminded everyone that the chair was never simply a piece of furniture. It represented the woman who had stood beside Daniel when he had nothing at all. It belonged to the person who had sacrificed quietly without ever demanding applause or recognition. Then Margaret turned her gaze toward Daniel and asked him where he had been when Elena worked nights helping him build his company. Where was Vanessa when Elena sold her own jewelry to help cover the company's early expenses? Where was Vanessa when Daniel's very first major deal failed, and he came home convinced he was a complete failure? Elena had been there through every single one of those moments. Daniel's face changed completely. He had forgotten, not because the memories had disappeared, but because success had made him far too comfortable to remember them. Vanessa finally stood up from the chair, looking flustered and humiliated. But Margaret was not finished yet. She told Daniel that wealth could buy a bigger house, expensive cars, and impressive dinners, but it could never buy back a person's dignity after they had destroyed it. Elena's eyes filled with warm tears. She expected Daniel to defend himself angrily. Instead, he walked toward her and admitted openly that he had been selfish and blind. He said he had confused success with true happiness and attention with genuine love. He apologized from the depths of his heart, but Elena did not immediately forgive him. She told him something that everyone in that room needed to hear. Forgiveness was not the same as forgetting, she explained. She had spent years giving pieces of herself away in order to protect their marriage. She was not going to spend the rest of her life proving that she deserved basic respect. Daniel finally understood that the woman standing before him was not the quiet, passive wife he had taken for granted all these years. She was the very person who had helped build the life he was now so carelessly risking. The very next morning, Elena packed a small suitcase and left the mansion behind, not because Margaret had told her to, and not because Daniel had demanded it, but because she finally understood that choosing herself was not an act of cruelty. Months passed by slowly. Daniel began therapy, stepped away from the company for a while, and started rebuilding the trust he had so thoroughly destroyed. He did not expect Elena to return quickly. Instead, he learned to respect her boundaries and give her the space she needed. Margaret remained close to Elena and encouraged her to build a life that truly belonged to her. Eventually, Elena started her own small foundation aimed at helping women who had sacrificed their careers and dreams for their families. Daniel supported the foundation generously without asking for anything at all in return. 1 year later, Elena returned to the mansion for Margaret's birthday celebration. The dining room looked almost exactly the same as it had before. The flowers were arranged beautifully on the table. The table was covered with fine dishes and sparkling glassware, and there was that same chair waiting. Daniel stood beside it, but this time he did not pull it out for Vanessa. He pulled it out for Elena, and then he stepped back respectfully. Elena looked over at Margaret, and the old woman smiled warmly at her. Elena sat down, not because she was reclaiming a place or a title, but because she had finally realized something far more important. Her worth had never come from a chair. It had never come from a husband. It had never come from a mansion. Her worth had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who quietly endure until they finally find the courage to choose themselves. And before you go, comment "I choose dignity" if you believe that everyone deserves respect, loyalty, and a second chance, but never at the cost of their own self-worth. Because sometimes the most powerful moment in a person's life is not when someone finally chooses them. It is when they finally choose themselves.